energy, and expertise to locate primary sources, to discover the ages of the 59 slaves, their family relationships, their chosen surnames after emancipation, their levels of literacy, their death certificates, relatable newspaper articles, and their descendants, to tell a story about the other half of the Foy family household who once lived at Poplar Grove. Because of this extensive research, she applied for and received a North Carolina Humanities Council grant to further her research on slavery in southeastern coastal North Carolina along the Cape Fear River. Her research has culminated into creating, designing, and documenting a permanent slave exhibit, From Civil War to Civil Rights, the African American Experience at Poplar Grove, which is scheduled to open on June 19th of this year. Kimberly's desire to interpret and communicate historical facts transcends her own personal goals and pursuits. She understands that the local is global and that the interconnectedness of the human experience remains current, relevant, and crucial to social and political change. I cannot think of a more worthy person to be introducing to you this evening. Kimberly Sherman, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. As Caroline told you a little bit about what has been going on here at Poplar Grove over the past year since really kind of a divine appointment, I think, with what happened with me getting involved and working up here. And for tonight, you know, we're kicking off a huge series that's really brand new for Poplar Grove, stepping out into new territory here, and culminating with the opening of that exhibit in June, which is really exciting. And so I want to thank all of you for coming out on just such a beautiful night. You could be doing many other things, and I just appreciate you having the interest to come out and hear not only what Dr. Harris and Ms. Dack have to say, but also to join in on this discussion that we are so longing to be able to ignite here. So we also want to thank the North Carolina Humanities Council. Without their assistance, this would not be able to happen, and so it's with their support that we're able to fund not only the exhibit, but also this lecture series and events that are happening over the next couple of months. And so over the past year, we've been trying to find out more about these individuals living here, not only at Poplar Grove, but also in the Scottsdale community. And so this is just a part of creating that new discussion and creating something that's going to last into the future. And so first I want to introduce Dr. Glenn Harris. He's going to kick things off. We're going to start out with a short clip from the Under the Kudzo documentary. But Dr. Glenn Harris from UNC Wilmington, Associate Professor in History. I had the honor to work with him during my graduate years there. And so he's going to give us a little bit of the historical context of the Rosenwald School movement here locally. And then also Ms. Claudia Stack, a local educator and tireless promoter of preservation here in Pender County, specifically with the Rosenwald schools. And we'll talk about the preservation efforts that she and her organization are working with there. So I ask that you give a big round of applause for our speakers tonight, and we'll get things started. Thanks.
This film focuses on the history of two Rosenwald schools in Pender County, a smaller one called Kaintuck, and the Pender County Training School, which was for many years the only public high school for African Americans in Pender County. And I thought we could just watch the first, it's about 10 minutes in the beginning that shows how schools came to be built by in cooperation with African American communities in Pender, and their experience really reflects a lot of the regional experience. So it's maybe not the greatest setting to hear everything so well, and I don't think we should watch tons of it, but maybe about the first 10 minutes will give you a sense of what was going on in the early 1900s.
faces development pressure from the rapidly growing city of Wilmington, located just 15 minutes to the south. Yet many old school buildings in Pender County still stand and give their quiet testimony about the order of life here from the early 1900s to the 1960s. They tell a complex story of the pride that black and white communities had in their schools and of the relationship between those segregated communities. In the early 1920s, Pender County built 6 brick schools for whites and provided transportation to these centralized schools.
This is a fast, you ride around through North Carolina, you see these finished brick veneer schools which were built about 1925.
However, black children walked, sometimes up to 5 or 6 miles to attend small primary schools scattered throughout the county.
It was important to them because all of their lives they made names, and somebody else wrote their name. And they didn't want their children to be in that situation. They wanted their children educated.
Approximately 50% of Pender County children were black. During Reconstruction and in the 4 decades that followed, black communities frequently created small schools in homes, churches, old barns, and lodge buildings. Some communities built simple schoolhouses and often supplied room and board for the teachers.
And the black people sold pies and chicken dinners and whatnot to help build a school.
Black families' involvement with the schools they helped to build was ongoing. They often helped to maintain the school, as was the case for the Love Grove School in western Pender County. Built by a church during the Reconstruction era and used as a public school until 1958.
My name is Ernest Walker White. My mother is Carrie Walker. Carrie Walker came to this school. So did all of her children.
All the hair, my uncle and my grandma raised me. I remember, sometimes I was using the wild, big bag, grandma, they was still in there. It would be cold. I remember I used to go to the beach, it would be cold, and squat out on the other side, move the beach. That's been a long time. I remember Uncle that didn't work on that school.
If it had not been for the efforts of Pender's black communities and the pioneering philanthropy of Julius Rosenwald, black schools in Pender County would have remained terribly inadequate. However, in 1912, Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee University, convinced philanthropist Julius Rosenwald to assist black communities that were willing to raise money for school building. Pender County's black residents organized and raised funds to build 15 Rosenwald schools.
They were told that Rosenwald would pay half, but that if they would raise the other half to build a school. But Mr. and Ms. Corbett said that they knocked on the door of every black family in that district. He sat down and he said, "Times I got some pennies. Sometimes I got a nickel. Sometimes I got a dime. And once in a blue moon I would get $1. But we kept going."
The funding package that built the Kaintuck Rosenwald School was actually more complex. The Rosenwald Fund typically matched the black community's contribution up to 25% of the cost of the school. However, Rosenwald money was not released until the school board had committed to supporting the school. In order to build the Kaintuck School, The black community gathered $1,226. The Rosenwald Fund contributed $800, and the school board committed $674.
The property for the school was donated by B.F. Keith.
Land for Rosenwald schools was frequently donated by either black or white community members. B.F. Keith is said to have donated the site for the Kentuck School.
Benjamin Franklin Keith. He was the son or grandson of the original Keith, Mr. William Keith, that got the land granted in 1820. And a lot of the church land and the school land, they got it from there.
And going to school, right? I was 6 years old, I was born in 1960.
We'd love to be able to show the entire documentary. We're going to go ahead and ask Dr. Harris to come on up, and we're going to go ahead and talk more about the historical context behind the creation of these schools.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your attendance here. There's a lot of places, a lot of things that are going on in the area of Benton County and Wilmington, New Hampshire County, and for you taking time to come out is greatly appreciated. I am a professor in the history department at UNCW, but I would be remiss to not also talk about that I am on the board of trustees for North Carolina Humanities Council. So I do represent, of course, the university, but I am here representing North Carolina Humanities Council also. And it was with pleasure, although I recused myself from the vote, that I was very pleased that the grant came through for the application. It was a wonderful application, it was well put together, and it was enthusiastically supported by the board. And I just wanted to say, without question, we're happy to do that, and to see this come in and to also be a part of it is my pleasure. So thank you, and we know how important the humanities are nationwide, but without question in the state of North Carolina. We're charged with the board of North Carolina Humanities Council is charged with about $150,000, $160,000 of the state's money. And what we are charged to do with that is to make sure that we can get the humanities in all 100 counties of the state. And we have pretty well done that within the last 6-7 years, that we've covered all 100 counties. And so for this to be in Pender County is fantastic, and I'm more than happy to be a part of this. As we start talking about the importance of these schools and the quick collaboration that reflecting that they had on Booker T. Washington, it becomes important to know the importance of Booker T. Washington where education is concerned. What is going on as we leave the 19th century coming into the 20th century, because a number of the foundations of these Rosenwald schools come out of the foundation and thought process of Booker T. Washington. And it's an interesting competing philosophy about what type of education should be most interesting and most useful for blacks in the United States. What we're dealing with in this post-Civil War period, in this post-antebellum period as we come to the 20th century, what blacks are trying to make sure is that they can be productive members of the community. And Booker T. Washington is very acute and very particular in making that conversation. What we do know is that in the United States, withstanding or not withstanding the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment, by the time we get to 1896, the 13th Amendment, of course, 1865, 14th Amendment, 1868, the 15th Amendment, 1870, that's the most radical adjustment that we have to the Constitution in our history. Up to that point, the most radical adjustment we have to the Constitution. And it's an institution of slavery. The 14th Amendment arguably can be the most important of those three because it defined what citizenship would be, what it took to be a citizen of the United States. And so now you have 3.5 to 4.5 million blacks that are now legally a part of the United States. They're American citizens. And that is a part of the struggle that is going on, because although they're legally a part of the United States, it is not completely accepted by white society. And so, and it's interesting, so we have that radical adjustment to the Constitution. What is going on in a number of southern states, and for that fact, in some northern states and some Midwestern states, is trying to revert back to the institution of slavery in all means but the title itself. And so by the time we get to 1896, you have the Supreme Court that dealing with this in Plessy versus Ferguson. What we know with Plessy versus Ferguson, when you hear that term, we always talk about separate but equal. So immediately you know, if we say separate but equal, that's Plessy versus Ferguson. And in the 20th century, by the time we get to the 20th century, how we recognize that, when anytime you saw a white water fountain, you would see a black water fountain. When you would see public areas, you know, they would have a white area and a black area. That's separate but equal context. Those type of pictures, those type of photographs, and things that we're very aware of, that is equated with Plessy versus Ferguson. But what Plessy versus Ferguson did, how it readjusted society, revised American society, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment took us from legal segregation to the ideal of legal integration. Plessy versus Ferguson reversed that, took us back in a number of real sense, back to legalized segregation, where segregation is legal in the United States again. And so we're struggling with this, and this is interesting because we live in a nation without question that is predicated off of the idea of equality. We believe in egalitarianism, we believe in equality, we believe in the importance of individualism. And so to have that as an ideal of American society, as an idea but not our reality, and so you see the conflict that we're dealing with, the ideal of equality versus segregation. That debate, the ideal of equality versus integration, is a debate that takes place both within the white community and without question in the black community. Booker T. Washington is dealing with this, but it's not just about integration for blacks, it's also, should we fight for integration? Should we maintain segregation? And the third variable that comes into that is assimilation. So it's a debate, integration, segregation, or assimilation. What would be the best path to integrate these 3.5 to 4.5 million blacks into American society where they can embrace these particular ideas? Whites are put off by the fact that blacks are legally a part of American society. So this whole idea that comes into play, the importance of education, is important to show particular communities that blacks can be productive members of their community. So where this integration versus segregation versus assimilation comes into play is how do you get into Booker T. Washington, and they're competing strategies about how to integrate those particular ideas, the ideal of integration, which is Booker T. Washington. He's an integrationist in a number of senses, that we should integrate into American society, not maintain segregation and not assimilate, but be allowed to integrate into American society. It's an interesting way because Booker T. Washington felt that the best way to do that is through an industrial education, that you learn a trade, you learn a particular type of trade that will get you employment. The whole idea behind this is that if you can show white America that you can be a productive member of your community, and being a productive member of your community, you become less threatening. They will reevaluate how they look at blacks in American society. But also, interestingly, this particular philosophy, you can align it with the philosophy and the ideas of Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, which is one of our most purest Renaissance men, becomes the purest example during his time of what the American ideal would be. He talks about if you improve yourself personally, if you improve yourself intellectually, you become a productive member of your community. Improving yourself, you improve your community. Improving community, you improve your state. Improving your state, you improve the nation. The nation's idea, that idea of equality by being a productive member. So Booker T. Washington, in a number of senses, follows along with some of the arguments that Benjamin Franklin put forward. And you see these ideas when they come into play, both at Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University, and how he incorporates these particular ideas into these schools that we're talking about now. So the competing strategies, Washington's conservatism versus W.E.B. Du Bois's radicalism. Radicalism in the sense that he wanted to challenge instead of sitting back. He wanted to challenge the ideas of white society as opposed to just embracing those particular ideas. What Booker T. Washington really focused on: self-help, industrial education, accommodation. Self-help, industrial education, and accommodation. Even though he's an integrationist, he would back some of the ideas of accommodation if it allowed the funding to keep coming through. Those of you that don't know the tight history of Tuskegee University, or Tuskegee Institute, Tuskegee Industrial Institute, established in 1881. It is one of the first schools, if not the first black university, that is financially supported by blacks and whites. And this is interesting because this is an institution. This is an institution set up primarily for black society, but with an incredible amount of support from white society. That philosophy you will see come into play when you look at these particular schools that are being established, especially the ones in Pender County. But when you look at the full context of these schools that are being established, that follow along with everything that was going on at Tuskegee University. Booker T. Washington's philosophy, thrift, hard work, self-reliance, and patience, those particular values, those particular virtues, is what he wanted to instill in black Americans, both individually and collectively, because those virtues, those values, resonate in middle-class American society. Booker T. Washington was a strong component, a strong advocate for blacks participating in the status quo of American society. When we say the status quo, the dominant way of thinking in American society, middle class values in American society, this notion, this idea that we are a Protestant Christian country, that we believe in capitalism, that we believe in democracy. Those ideas are very much an individualistic idea. So all of these principles that we're talking about, that I'll introduce you to, is really what Booker T. Washington talked about. And once again, this is on a larger level. So the idea is when we look at these particular schools that are being established, and one thing you saw with this quick clip, it is almost like a top-down idea. Booker T. Washington talks about these on a large level. If you want to see how those ideas resonate on an everyday basis, is to look at how these high schools are being built. Because what you see at Tuskegee Institute is really what you're going to see at these high schools, these middle schools, and these schools that are being established. So he talks about being one of the first schools for colored Americans and it's financially sponsored by blacks and whites. So it's interesting, not necessarily that they came out of Tuskegee University, but the teachers that would teach at these particular schools that are being established by this Rosenwald Fund, and these that become Rosenwald schools, but based off of the philosophies of Booker T. Washington. The teachers that are teaching the students here embrace this same Washington philosophy, this same Washington ideology that he talks about. So when you look at this, the student teachers, a normal and industrial school, the students that, and this is one of the most impressive things about Booker T. Washington, about his university, and how this will resonate in the Rosenwald schools. Once it is established in 1881, and these are early pictures of some of the buildings at Tuskegee Institute. What is most surprising and most unknown about it is that from the time it was established in 1881, roughly until we get to the turn of the century, this is the turn of the 20, when we come to the 1900s, the turn of the 20th century, most of the buildings that are constructed at Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute are constructed by the students. So they're not large buildings by any means. They are buildings that would be something that would almost reflect like the building that we're in right now, not the elaborate stuff that we see at colleges and universities and the like right now. You see at UNCW. Not that type of construction, but more this type of construction. But the buildings that are established there are constructed by the students. And so when we talk about Washington, the students that go there, what he wanted them to do is to understand this philosophy about hard work, about thrift, about learning these industrial education, the industrial arts, learning these ideas, teaching these ideas to the students. So they would become the teacher, they would come to Tuskegee, they're not indoctrinated, that's much too strong of a word, but they are taught these particular philosophies with the hope that once they graduate, they would go back to their communities, become the teachers, and instill these philosophies, these principles, these ideas that are very much aligned with American society, American idealism, in the students that are going to these schools. So when you look at the Rosenwald schools, he goes to, this is Julius Rosenwald, arguably one of the reasons he attaches himself to Booker T. Washington, because these philosophies, these ideas are resonating throughout American society, resonating throughout the black community. It is not known widely in all circles how popular Booker T. Washington is in the United States. He's incredibly popular. And I back this up slightly just to show you the magnitude of Booker T. Washington. Up until 1865, let me back this. In 1895 is going to be the lynch point for Booker T. Washington. Before that time, the most popular black man in the United States is Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, hands down. Frederick Douglass was born a slave. He is this pure Renaissance man, this rags to riches ideology that we have, the philosophy that we have in American society, that regardless of where you're born, through hard work, through diligence, embracing the American idea, you can always progress and elevate to the highest realms of American society. Frederick Douglass was born a slave, but by the 1880s, born a slave in 1835, but by the 1880s, he's the most well-respected, most well-received black man in the United States. He has served a number of positions, whether you were talking about an ambassador in Haiti, whether we're talking about the deeds recorder in Washington, D.C., and he's appointed by 3 or 4 presidents in a row to these particular positions. So we look at Frederick Douglass as a model of what can be accomplished in American society. He writes 3 autobiographies. His first autobiography was part of this American literary renaissance that takes place in 1845. My point with talking about Frederick Douglass is to show you the magnitude that Douglass has in American society. He's the one that talks about how are we going to create a society, not where different races don't exist in American society, but how can we have an American society where race is less of an issue. He was trying to deal with that, and you see that clearly through his 3 autobiographies. By the time we get to his 3rd autobiography, that is Frederick Douglass' 3rd autobiography, that if we attune closely to the Constitution, if we can take those ideas that we've talked about that came out of the Declaration of Independence and reflect on the Constitution, we could have this type of utopian society that we always thought we could have, that our ideas would become our reality. Frederick Douglass dies in 1895. From that point on, and as we talk about Booker T. Washington, and this is slightly because Booker T. Washington was also born a slave. And we're making this interesting transition. I'll show you how W.E. Du Bois comes in and how all of these ideas are going to resonate, of course, in the Rosenwald schools. But when Frederick Douglass dies in 1895, it is Booker T. Washington who ascends to that position. And it's an incredible position. And what takes him, a number of things that take Washington there is not only the wide success, the incredible success at Tuskegee University, Normal Industrial Institute, now Tuskegee University. But the popularity, the success of that university is really impressive. Washington is very clear about not challenging the fact that there is racism in the United States. He's very clear without challenging the fact that there's prejudice and discrimination in the United States. He said, look, it's not that it doesn't exist, it does. It's what do you do withstanding or notwithstanding they exist. What black Americans need to focus on is being productive members of the community. And so that philosophy that doesn't challenge white America is one of the reasons why his ideas are so successful. Once that is done, and we see these ideas resonating in Tuskegee University, Washington now ascends to these very highlighted positions, and it is he who ascends to the position that Frederick Douglass had. And he eclipses even the popularity that Frederick Douglass had. So it is Washington's ideas, it is Washington's philosophy that we're talking about that really is going to take us into the 20th century. How are blacks going to situate themselves into a society that says you don't exist by showing white Americans you can be productive members of society. So what you see at these Rosenwald schools are Washington's philosophy that he's talking about. These high moral character, absolute cleanliness, both students and faculty, develop craft and occupational skills, equip students for jobs and trade and agriculture. These things are what you can use to find a job, to find employment, to be productive members of your community. Once again, to be productive members of your community, to then be reevaluate that the presence of blacks in American society can be reevaluated and be much more acceptable in white society. So these ideas become very important. And as I said, I always tied this to the ideas of Benjamin Franklin. Franklin is our everything man, is our Renaissance man. But when you look at Benjamin Franklin, after all the things I've talked about, what we like about Franklin, not only is he, the discoverer of the Gulf Stream, he picks that up. Not only is he deals with these ideas where electricity is concerned, not only is he in the Truman Hall of Fame, he is our pure Renaissance man. He's a signer of the 3 major documents in American history. But Benjamin Franklin was very clear about improving society, improving the nation by improving yourself. These listed 13 virtues. Resolve to become more frugal, to save enough money to pay what you may owe others, to be very honest and sincere in every word and action, to be industrious for whatever business I take in hand, to speak ill of no man, whatever, not even a man or two. These particular virtues, and mind, he said, you don't have to embrace all of these virtues. But if you embrace even 3 or 4 of them, you're improving yourself. And that's what he strongly adheres to. These principles are what Washington picked up. And you see these principles, again, that resonate at his institution and also will resonate in the Rosenwald School. So it becomes very important to understand these particular connections that we talk about. What is the magnitude of Booker T. Washington? When you talk about him and Julius Rosenwald, that connection is an impressive connection, but it's not anything new in American history. It's not anything new in American society. Indeed, as I said, it's been taking place since 1881, what we see at his institution. So these ideas about improving yourself and improving your community resonate with American history and American ideas. And so now, because you see this, and this is very quick, now mind you, I'm trying to be judicious with my words and not talk too much. I'm not trying to overwhelm anybody. But, you know, historians can talk a lot. I try to relax. But I'm just trying to lay the foundation of what is important, you know, that when you see these videos, when you see this film, you know, really what is going on, not only in the foreground, but even more importantly, in the background. When we talk about these particular individuals, biographies are very important for us because what we learn, what we begin to learn about one another, we learn through the ideas and the arguments and the involvement of everybody else. What we try and do individually in here is always improve ourselves, always improve our community,